Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
Well, welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. My name is Joe Nash. I'm here with Zina Shevchik. We're here to talk about new books here at the Colonie Library. What we do is, if you're new to the show, Zina and I go down to the new bookshelf and we go to our technical services department where all the new books are being processed, and we bring up a whole bunch to tell you about. It's always difficult to choose because, as I've said many times, we get over 100 books a week here, and this is show number 40. And this is Zina's first show, as I'm laughing. This is Zina's first show as a retired. She retired a couple weeks ago, but she's still coming back to do the show. So thank you for coming back, Zina.
Oh, you're welcome.
Has much changed in the library?
No, it feels like I've been on vacation for 2.5 weeks, and now I'm back. It's a privilege to be able to look at all the books before they're processed, and I love it. And that's.
So you're still trying to get first dibs on the books? Is that what?
Well, I do. I mean, anybody can do that. You go to our library's webpage, and you go to the section of books added in the last 14 days, and it has an on order
Okay,
link, and you can see what's been ordered. So you can get your reserves in really early.
All right, so this will be your first show as a retired librarian. So let's see how you.
Retiring is good. Retiring is good, but I'm reading. I'm reading from books from beginning to end, but not these. Not these. Next show we have, I'll have read all the books from beginning to end. This is my first. I'm starting, right, Joe?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. This is not your ordinary book. It's what one reviewer called a treasure trove of graphic artwork. I found it on the new bookshelf here in the library, but its actual publication date is 2012. But I had never seen anything like it, so I wanted to bring it to other people's attention. It's called Building Stories, and it's by Chris Ware, W-A-R-E. Apparently, he's well known in the graphic artwork, graphic novel sphere, and it's very unusual.
That's a box there.
It's a box, like a box for a game, and it has it has 14 different pieces to it. Some of them look like a regular book, and most of this artwork is as if it was a comic book.
Or a graphic novel.
Or a graphic novel, excuse me. They do refer to it as comics in a lot of the review and descriptors here. But the Building Stories, it's talking about one particular building in Chicago, apparently. It's a fictional building. And the lives of the people within that building. And what makes it unusual is that there's really no beginning and no end. You can start just about anywhere on any of the pieces. Now, this also looks like a regular book as well. At one point in one of these pieces, it actually has the building thinking some things, describing itself and what's going on in the building. So it follows it's a 3-story building, and it follows the lives of all 3 tenants. One of whom is the actual landlady.
There's only 3 tenants?
There's 3 apartments in this building. And here's a small, like a connected comic strip. Or there's a little, there's, again, everything I'm picking up looks like a book, but there's something, they call these, I think, broadsheets. It's only a few pages.
So you can follow the lives of these 3 tenants.
Yes, and but you can. It's amazing. It really, you can drop in anywhere and figure out, you can go backward and forward. It's primarily about one tenant, but it does include the other tenants and how they affect her and her life.
So you can pick them up in any order.
You can pick them up in any order. This is like just a single
panel thing. Okay.
Single panel, and then it actually has like a board game, which is a picture of the street and the house that it's on, and it follows it through several, a few decades, and the life of this woman through a few decades, and it's just amazing. I mean, it's just so unusual.
Well, when it came out, I remember reading a pretty amazing review in the New York Times saying it was quite the.
It's incredible, and the story is not silly. I mean, it's if anything, it's it's realistic fiction, I'd say. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this back. I have to look at this. I was never very good at putting maps back. There we go. No, that didn't work. Okay, I'm going to have to put it aside, put it back together later. But it's very unusual. I've seen kits in the children's room where you have material that goes material of some kind. It could be toys or clothing that goes with a story. Obviously, we have books that have tapes and CDs that go along with books if you're learning how to, learning a new language or something like that. But this is so very unusual. It's just fascinating. So, Building Stories by Chris Ware. Okay,
my first book. Now, Zina, since you've retired, we did work together for 15 years, and all that time, did I ever tell you what my favorite movie was? Do you know what my favorite movie is?
No, I don't know. Okay. I would say Citizen Kane.
No, stop. Well, anyway. It's very interesting. I have a book here, which is about the making and all the behind the scenes and the history. Yes.
I just saw Mad as Hell. Network. I love that movie too.
This is a book. It's called Mad as Hell: The Making of Network and the Fateful Vision of the Angriest Man in Movies by David Itzkoff. Just came out. Really good book. I read it like in 3 days because as I said, Network is one of my all-time favorite movies. But the interesting thing about the book. The Howard Beale, of course, the main character with the Mad as Hell stuff, but it says here the fateful vision of the angriest man in the movies is not about Howard Beale. It's about the writer of the movie, Paddy Chayefsky, and it's about his life. It's mainly about Paddy Chayefsky and his life getting the movie made, his writing before and after. He wrote the movie Marty. Remember that movie?
Yes,
Marty?
I do.
Early 50s.
I remember that very, very well.
Yes,
he had a deep impression.
He was a writer on in the 50s, and when TV was live, there were like teleplays, these 1 hour dramas. Marty started that way.
The Chrysler Hour.
Yeah, and he wrote movies. He wrote the movie The Hospital in the early 70s. But he won an award for that. And he did Altered States. But he was a kind of an angry guy. He was always railing against everything, the way things were done, and because he never had complete control over whatever he was writing, because he was in TV or he was in the theater and everything. But he did get complete control over network, and it was stipulated in the contracts. A lot of times when you make a movie, obviously you improvise a lot, but they had to say things as written. And he was there for the filming of everything. So it's a great behind-the-scenes look at probably the greatest satire in American movies, and it goes into the whole. This movie came out in 1976. It's about the making of it. It's a lot about Paddy Chayefsky and what happened to him afterward, what happened to all the people. Peter Finch, William Holden, Faye Dunaway, great behind-the-scenes stuff. And if you love the movie Network, this is the book for you.
That was like
got great insights into why he wrote the book, because he was involved in television and what he really hated about television. And my favorite character in the movie is the William Holden character, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't remember it in that detail.
Well,
now you remind me.
Probably because I've seen the movie so many times.
I'll have to go back.
So anyway, it's called Mad as Hell: The Making of Network and the Fateful Vision of the Angriest Man in the Movies, about Paddy Chayefsky.
Never knew that about that.
Yes, it's a great, really good book.
It was a precursor to that movie. It was like the precursor to our screaming radio shows and TV shows now.
Well, the funny thing is, I was reading about this book. Keith Olbermann, who worked in all aspects of television too, said except for when they assassinate Howard Beale, every single thing he saw in that movie, he saw happen in real life with the television.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I believe it, and that people don't believe it. So the next book I have is very topical, I guess. It's called Mastering the Art of Soviet Cooking, a memoir of food and longing by Anya von Bremzen. Given what's happening in the current in the news right now between Russia and Ukraine and Crimea, I thought this was appropriate. Also, I have a Russian background, and so I was fascinated about what foods or recipes I might be familiar with. I can't say I was familiar with much. Anya von Bremzen is a well-known cookbook author, apparently. She's written cookbooks on Spanish, Spain, and Spain's food, and at least one other book about Russian food. She left the Soviet Union when she was, and it was from Odessa, her mother was from Odessa, was in the 1970s. Let's see if I've read my notes. 1970s, and she was 10 years old, and she said the food, learning the recipes, cooking the recipes, brought her back to her roots, and her mother helped her as well, put together all these recipes, one recipe or two recipes from every decade of the 20th century. And she starts out, like the first recipe has a connection to the Tsarist Russia, and it's something very fancy, and I'm going to destroy the words, I'm sure. It's called kulabiaka. It's a fish, rice, and mushroom in pastry. And then every decade that they choose a recipe, it has something to do with the history of the Soviet Union and Russia. In the 1940s, they actually don't present a recipe. They present a picture of a ration card that was given out in Soviet Russia. They have, in 1960s, they have a cornbread recipe because Khrushchev, who was the premier then, he loved cornbread, and he tried to make corn a staple of the Russian diet. He was a big proponent of the Russian people learning to grow corn and making it a staple of their diet. In the 1970s, she presents a Russian potato salad with pickles. It looks fantastic. I'm going to try that recipe, and then.
Are there recipes in there?
Yes, and she says that they're telling stories. Her mother is telling her stories of life, her life, her mother's life.
So it's part memoir, part history.
And it says a memoir of food and longing. The longing is kind of bittersweet of the good, trying to remember the good parts of life. Living in the Soviet Union and Russia, along with the knowledge that it's just a dream, really, of remembering the good parts, because there's so many bad parts to living in the Soviet Union. So it's a history lesson, it's a cultural history, it's a cookbook, and it's fascinating, and I'm going to take it home and finish reading it.
Well, you'll have time now that you're...
Yes, I actually am going to try a couple of the recipes. The potato salad, which is so much more than a potato salad. It has everything, incredibly diverse ingredients. So, Mastering the Art of Soviet Cooking, a memoir of food and longing, Anya Bremzen.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about, I don't usually talk about fiction too much, but I just listened to a novel, a brand new novel by a very popular author who, in my years as a librarian, we've always ordered multiple copies of her books. She's someone that all book groups always do her books, but I always said, well, I'm going to read her books. I never got around to it, but I listened to her new book. It's Alice McDermott. Have you read any of her books?
I don't. You'd have to tell me the titles. I don't know.
Her famous one was Charming Billy. Was
No.
one of The Prodigal. Wait, let's see. Charming Billy, Child of My Heart. At Weddings and Wakes was another one. After this.
No.
Anyway, this is her new book. It's called Someone. This is the audio by Alice McDermott. She writes. her main theme in all her books is the post-World War II generation, Catholic generation. She writes a lot about Catholic people, Long Island and just going to the suburbs, and so she writes a lot about Catholicism. This book is really good. I predict it's going to win some.
Say that
It's called Someone.
Someone.
I predict it will win either National Book Award or the Pulitzer. It's really good. It's an older woman thinking back over her life in little different, not a chronological. I mean, it's in chronological order, but there are just different aspects to her life. She grew up in the right before World War II and the 40s and 50s. Although the interesting thing about the book is, you never know you sort of can tell what year it is. She'll say the war, or, well, after the war, you don't really, there's no reference to outside events going on in the world, but it's beautifully, beautifully written. And think of, the only thing I can compare it to, and this is obviously high praise, but it reminds me a lot of James Joyce.
Wow.
Think of Dubliners, written by a woman, all in the first person. It's really, so she may be thinking of something when she was a kid in Brooklyn, it's about her growing up in Brooklyn. Then all of a sudden she's a teenager. Then it's her early married life. So there's gaps, but they're all obviously, and it seems to be from near the end, she's in a like a retirement home or a nursing home or something. You sort of can't tell, but the memories are just from different aspects of her life, beautifully written. About growing up, how she got married, and some of her, and remembering her parents. She had a brother who became a priest but left the priesthood. So she has a lot of this oppressive Catholicism in there.
Something you are drawn to.
I mean, I'm thinking, not in a negative sense, but all her books revolve around Catholic families, and I'm going to have to read more of her books because even though I've seen her books in every library I've worked in. She's immensely popular. I'm going to have to read more. So anyway, this is Someone by Alice McDermott. I predict will be the award winners this year when the book awards come out.
We've got it on tape.
But she is a very, very popular author, and I don't know how I always said I was going to read her, but I never got around to it.
I'm going to talk about an author that I haven't read, although I've seen her books.
Everywhere.
Isabel Allende.
Yes. Yep.
I think the one book that most people will know about is A Daughter of Fortune, which I never read.
She writes fiction and nonfiction.
Yes, and she has a very interesting history. She's I don't know, she was born in Peru but lived in Chile or vice versa, and so she has a very different background than
again, she's a very popular author.
Right, and she lives in California, born in Peru, raised in Chile, and yes, a lot of people know her work. This was very. It's on I think it's been on the bestseller list, and it's not completely new. But when I start to tell you what it's about, it sounds like it wouldn't appeal to a lot of people. But the character development is just amazing, and it's easy to read, and the characters are very unusual. It's in present day San Francisco, and to a certain extent, it's a throwback to the 60s and 70s, because one of the main characters is she's a massage therapist, and she's into holistic health, and it's her storefront business is in the middle of the city of San Francisco, and a lot of her friends are involved in holistic health practitioners. But her daughter is actually a very contemporary teenager who plays online games where people take on different personas, and they try to solve mysteries. And so this is a mystery that connects the mother, who is in San Francisco as a holistic health practitioner, and her daughter, and how her daughter, with her friends playing an online game, solves some mysteries, actually current mysteries, contemporary mysteries.
So you say it was a mystery novel. I didn't.
But it is and it isn't. It's a really fantastic character development. It's not mainly a mystery.
Okay.
It's mainly just a story about this family, and they're very unusual. And yes, at the end, it's solving a mystery, but it's. I know nothing about like this book I'm going to talk about. It's called Of Dice and Men, which is about the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons and its development. And so this is kind of the teenage daughter.
Now everything's online with the.
Yes, right. Now everything's online, but it's basically the role-playing game that the teenager is playing with her friends online is basically very similar to the Dungeons and Dragons.
But they actually solve.
They actually solve a couple of mysteries, and one of them involves her mother, and
Okay.
so it's fascinating. Ripper, Isabel Allende, a novel, and I'm going to try Isabel Allende's other books as well because I think it's really well written.
Yes, I think
And
she's a very. I think she's won a lot of awards. And
It'll bring you into, characters that you wouldn't normally come across.
Well, my next book is a history book, a World War II book. It's the third book in a series by Rick Atkinson. The whole thing is called the Liberation Trilogy. This is book number 3. It's called The Guns at Last Light, The War in Western Europe, 1944 to 45. I have not read any of the 3. However, I can tell you that the first 2 won every award you can win for nonfiction. Every history prize, Pulitzer's, National Book. I'm not sure which one which, but every single time the 3 books came out, amazing reviews. People just say they're tremendous. The first book was called The Army at Dawn, which was about the North African campaign, World War II, I think 42 to 43. The second book was called The Day of Battle, the Sicily and Italy campaign when the Allies came up through They came up through Italy, and that was the war on in Europe. And then this book obviously covers Western Europe. I think it starts with D-Day, of course. And the 3 books together, he calls the Liberation Trilogy. The liberating Europe from. And like I say, each book, they always get unbelievably great reviews. I mean, I know people that have read these that like military history. They say the books are just absolutely fantastic. Again, books I've been meaning to read. But
when you retire.
One of these days, yes, maybe I will.
We know what you'll be doing.
These books, I got to say, they do get amazing reviews. So it's Rick Atkinson, Volume 3. I think it's, of course, this is 1945. This is the end of the trilogy, but I think he's going to start on something about the Pacific Theater. I'm not sure, though. So The Guns at Last Light, Volume 3 of the Liberation Trilogy by Rick Atkinson.
So
amazing reviews.
So do you think that the Civil War has been written about more than World War II, or books about World War II?
I think the Civil War may have more books about it, but only because they have 100
Longer
years
time.
on them. 100 years from now, the World War II section in libraries, if they still have books, may be just as big as the Civil War. I mean, our section in our library, the World War II, I think it takes up an aisle and a half, which is pretty equal to the Civil War book. So, I mean, as far as our library goes, it's pretty, but I think overall, there's just the fact that Civil War has a 100-year head start.
Yeah, no, and our veterans,
not 100 years,
the veterans of World War II are slowly passing away. So I think that's a lot of the readership. So it's going to be interesting to see about the readership following.
And the funny thing is, whenever we try to weed the libraries, I'm sure when you were working here with Zina, we try to sometimes get rid of, I hate to say get rid of books, but sometimes when books don't go out for 3 or 4 or 5 years, unless they're an important book.
We have to make space for new books.
And when we look in the back of our books, the World War II books and the Civil War books, it's hard to find one that hasn't gone out.
Right, they are.
That hasn't gone out in the last 6 months. They all constantly go out. So there's still a lot of people interested in history out there.
Right, absolutely.
And people interested in reading a real book.
Yeah, really, a real book. Paper. This book I just referred to is called Of Dice and Men, the story of Dungeons and Dragons and the people who play it, by David M. Ewalt, and in parentheses he has level 15 cleric, which has something to do with the stage of play and how successful you are in the stage of play. Now, I have to admit that I know nothing about these role-playing games. It piqued my interest when I saw it because someone who does my hair, she said her husband, as a leisure activity, plays these role-playing games.
Oh, okay.
And I know that I have a nephew who used to do role-playing games. I don't know if he was doing specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but I never really understood it, the appeal. But after reading this and listening to what this gentleman says about the experience and the influence on his life, it is very interesting. He calls it communal storytelling, the Dungeons and Dragons, and before the development of computers being accessible to everyone.
Because that was played. That wasn't played online, right?
No,
but
it was.
I don't know if it is now.
No, well, no, it's not.
Okay.
He's an editor. This gentleman the author is an editor at Forbes magazine, a business magazine, right? And he stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons when he said his life got quote unquote serious, and he went back to it after he started researching this book, and he just says he loves it, and he's hooked again, and it's like a fantasy role-playing games. But in this book, he talks about its roots, the roots of role-playing games, and he goes right back to chess and the origins of the chess game and board games, and that in itself is fascinating. But he talks about the connection people have to each other and playing, meeting every week, and starting where they stopped the previous week and how they assume personas. I mean, online they talk about avatar, having an avatar.
Maybe the appeal of it is because it's not online.
Well, it's fantasy, but creating your own story. That's fascinating. I mean, what's the difference?
Does he say people are still playing?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Of course, more people are playing the online role-playing games, but it's very interesting. Of Dice and Men, the story of Dungeons and Dragons, and I can't read, and the people who play it. Go ahead.
Does he mention the game Risk?
Remember I think he mentions the game Battleship.
Battleship, of course.
I think yes, of course he talks about those, which is
playing a game is a communal thing.
Yeah.
It is a. Yeah.
But in this, you actually assume personas, and there's a dungeon master who decides certain things and manages the game, and you have to reach a certain level before you become.
I wonder what the difference is, because I don't play any of those. Between that and the online, it seems like the non-online would be more fun.
Well, you're looking at people. I mean, you can reach over and touch the person that you're playing the game with.
Okay, now here's a big giant book about a theme that's sort of, I can never resist books like this. It's 400 and...
You can't resist the long book?
Well, the topic, I'm going to tell you in a second. 465 pages plus, 80 pages of notes. This is called, I wish you could see the cover better. I'm going to hold it up. It's called The Dream of the Great American Novel.
The Dream.
By Lawrence Buell. And what he does is, that term, the Great American Novel, is there one, what is it? Writers. I'm writing the Great American Novel, but obviously the fact that there's always many contenders for that down through history. So what he's done, he's analyzing this theme, the Great American Novel. Where did it come from? Why do people use it? Then he goes through, the possible contenders, but he breaks them down into four templates, four overriding themes. He calls them four scripts, and then he gives 2 or 3 examples. And I'll tell you the example, you'll understand what he's saying. And then he just analyzes, that theme or whatever you say, and the book but then he brings in a lot of other books and then it's great literary. So if you read a lot of books, and if you know all these books I'm going to mention, this is a book. It's actually checked out to me at this moment because
It's really new. It says February 2014.
Yeah, it just came out. So there's an introduction called The Unkillable Dream, because that term, the great American novel, has been around forever. So then he has the 4 scripts, he calls them, the 4 templates, the four overriding themes in American literature. So script 1 is called Made Classic by Retelling, which is all about probably the first great American novel, The Scarlet Letter. All the different themes involved in The Scarlet Letter, all the modern takes on The Scarlet Letter. There's been a lot of people, reinterpreting it or rewriting it.
Puritanism.
Yeah, all that stuff. So the first one's mainly concerned with Scarlet Letter. And then we have script 2, Aspiration in America. It goes through a couple, different chapters. But in this section, we will come upon Great Gatsby's in this section. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser. So that's that section.
That's the one I thought.
We're going to say it. So script 3 is called Romancing the Divides, which encompasses Uncle Tom's Cabin, Huck Finn, William Faulkner's novel Absalom, Absalom, and Toni Morrison's novel Beloved. So that's the romantic section. And the last section is called Improbable Communities, which encompasses, through that theme, Moby Dick, John Del Passo's The USA Trilogy and Grapes of Wrath, and Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. So all the books I just mentioned are all the biggies in American literature. So he's got it broken down into these themes. But again, within each theme, he brings in tons of other authors and books. Yeah, but he uses like Moby Dick, the template for that, and then he says, he brings in everybody. I mean, everyone's mentioned in here, but it's very interesting, that theme, the great American novel. So if you like American literature, this book is. And
as time goes by, the idea of, in hindsight, you look back and you see, you interpret the novels.
Look, they just made a new version of Great Gatsby, so Great Gatsby it's still around. The dream of the great American novel. All right, so you want to do one more?
These are kind of a how-to genre here. I am redoing parts of my home in my retirement. I mean, I'm planning it. I'm not actually doing it. And I came across these books that I thought other people might like to know that we have in the library. This is a National Building Cost Manual and the Contractor's Pricing Guide, Residential Repair and Remodeling Costs, 2013. Now, one actually has, they're made for contractors and subcontractors and people in the building trades who actually do the work or plan the work, and it gives a breakdown of what in today's money, or in this, it's probably yesterday's money or the end of last year's money, whenever this was published, what is a fair cost in a certain region of the country in terms of what will cost the contractor or subcontractor.
Doing a bathroom, doing a kitchen.
Right. Well, it has it broken down in putting in a front door, putting in a door, a wood door, in a residential area home, putting in a wood door, putting in a steel door, putting down a hardwood, putting floor, putting down linoleum or vinyl floor, and gives, as I referred to it, it gives some cost variation according to the area of the country you're in, and it also it gives tables. This building cost manual, National Building Cost Manual, it has tables in it that I don't quite understand, and I think you probably have to work in the trades to understand some of the tables. Because it covers not just residential, but commercial buildings, school buildings, stores, general office buildings, supermarkets, fire stations. So it's very, this is very detailed, and I just don't know if other people know that we have these kinds of things that can be checked out. You know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we would have had these books only in our reference section to be used in the library, but now we have current ones that can be actually taken out. And as someone who's going to be renovating parts of my house, it's very interesting to see what the costs are of a basic contractor. And of course, you know, what there's a table in there about what the contractors might add as their profit. You know, so it's actually very helpful.
It is. Well, those are useful and practical books. But,
Absolutely.
You know,
How to
as you know,
estimate.
we just got our kitchen. It always costs more than you.
I know, of course. It's barring any unforeseen circumstances.
Okay, now I'll just do one more since we're going over our time limit here. I'll just do one more. Now, there's always been writing about popular music and rock and roll and everything. However, maybe it's because the baby boomers are aging. The last 4 or 5 years, you could almost say it's a whole new genre with these biographies and autobiographies of rock and roll and music people. Like I say, there's always been books about them, but they seem to be getting better, and they seem to be written about more seriously, is that people can actually glean serious insight from these books. I think it's safe to say it may have started with the Keith Richards.
I was just going to say.
That was the first one that maybe
like-
started the ball rolling in the last 3 or 4 years, because since then there's been a lot of biography and autobiographies and books about music. Not that there has never been, but it seems to be a very serious, it's being taken more serious these days. So here's a book of a genre, a little more on the forgotten side, but I've read really good reviews of this, and it's a group I'm sure you know, the Staple Singers. It's called I'll Take You There. It's the biography of Mavis Staples, the Staple Singers, and the March Up Freedom's Highway. The Staple Singers were kind of, I don't want to say they were a forgotten group, but you know, when you think of the 60s, people think of rock and roll, but you know, the folk and blues and the gospel music was very influential to the rock and rollers, and these guys were one of the main influences. And you know, when I just skimming through the book, it is about gospel music and the blues and folk music a lot, but the Staple Singers and Mavis Staples, they knew and recorded with and hung out with. There was a big crossover, you know, Bob Dylan, all those guys, the band, all that. So they were very influential. I don't really have much more to say about it other than I read really good reviews, and it's an aspect of popular music that maybe is forgotten a little bit because all the books are about rock and rollers, but you know, the folk, blues, gospel aspect is very important to rock and roll. So I'll Take You There, Mavis Staples, the Staple Singers, and the March of Freedom's Highway. And they were also very involved in the civil rights movement, singing at rallies and Martin Luther King. And there was a lot of good history in here of when they were coming up in the 50s and early 60s, the circuit they played. You know, they obviously didn't play in the big arenas or anything, but a lot of the rock and rollers always went to see them because they loved their music. So the author's name is Greg Cott. So that is it. So welcome back, Zina, from your retirement.
2.5 weeks.
Okay, and we will see you next time on So Many Books, So Little Time.